deals with this whole decision to come home, right? And obviously the music industry tanking is one reason, but if you think about it, it wasn't really the most major reason for me to come home because frankly, I think if I stayed on, I would still be employed by Sony BMG and I probably would still be doing okay. But around the time I was actually seeing a psychiatrist. Everybody in New York has a doctor. Okay, it's sort of fashionable. No, not really, but and one of the things that we were trying to resolve was this. Trying to figure out why I wanted to get out of Singapore in the first place. Everybody just wants to leave. A lot of people like to say that, but do people actually know why? I mean, a lot of people will cite things like, oh, it's too oppressive. Singapore is. There's too much control. The government is like always meddling with our lives. But I realized that that's not really the reason why I left. And after confronting several of my fears, one of the major things that I really didn't like doing was art. So I'm the last person on earth to want to do something like comic books, really, because I wasn't like the artist. You always hear stories of artists when you interview them. They'll say like, oh, I've always wanted to do this since I was a kid. When I was in my mother's womb, I was already like penciling stuff out, but not me. I was the guy who got the F in art. So, and you know what? Singapore is actually a country that is totally suited for someone like me because if I fail at art but get my A's in my math and my sciences, I'm good to go. And I was that guy. So technically, Singapore should be the best place for me to live in, because they reward people like that. But it turned out that I actually kind of like this thing called the arts after talking to my doctor for a couple of years. So she made me sketch and draw, which obviously if you haven't done that at all in your life, it's gonna suck. So it wasn't like this overnight thing which like, oh wow, I realized that I can draw. No. It took a long time. Probably like 2 to 3 years, in fact, to the point where I was about to decide to come home and I realized that, I've reached a point where I can actually draw. It's not the best, but I can actually make something out of it. And I realized I actually like to tell stories. So comics works really well, It's not the illustration part that excites me, it's the writing part that excites me. And that was like that little, it's enough for me to just make that leap. Say, okay, I'm gonna quit, I'm gonna come home and try drawing for a couple of years. That was the plan, at least. The Virgin Tour is nothing but pain and suffering the whole way, man.
So just like life then?
It's life basically. It's real life. And that's one of the biggest complaints that my critics give is that I can't read this lah. Wow, it's too real, man. I cannot do it. I read comics because I want to laugh. I don't want to go and feel horrible about myself. But sorry, man, that's the kind of stuff I want to write. So that's what you get. And when I first started, it was pretty much a very raw form of creation. Trying to do what I think looks right. And that's probably one of my biggest criticisms when I started. I guess you could say the haters out there are like, oh, this guy, he's not doing comic books, man. His books don't even seem like comics. Because they like to complain that I tend to have a lot more prose in there. But that's because I'm not really a comic book fan per se. I mean, I read comic books. I know what they are. I have some favorites. But it's not something that I grew up with and have always followed. Number one, and this is well known. Anyone who's read my books will know. I'm not a superhero guy. Okay, I don't care for superheroes. I don't really care so much for manga either. Even though I do read more Japanese manga than the American side, but mostly because I like the art style. I don't really care for the stories of some teenage guy who has superpowers, who has a magical power to see demons, and he has to be an orphan, right? So they can run around and do adventures because real kids actually have lives. So I don't care for that kind of story. I like very realistic stories, and that's kind of one of my trademarks that I've been building over time. As far as audience tastes are concerned, it's a difficult thing to gauge, really. I think if you ask any other artist out there, not just comic artists, it's very difficult to try to gauge what the audience wants. Sometimes you think this is what they want, you put out a work, and then they're like, yeah, I don't think so. They greet you with a very tepid response, right? Like, part 6 of The Tourist in particular was when I had a very long hiatus between part 5 and part 6. And everyone was sort of like looking forward to what was going to happen after the cliffhanger of part 5. And then I came out with part 6, and I thought this was a very accurate direction that I should be heading towards. I want to talk about the army, I want to talk about the elections, But then it turned out a lot of people really didn't like that particular book because I guess I was talking about things that made people very uncomfortable. Because when I featured the elections in that book, everyone thought I was going to be this anti-PAP guy, right? It's like, oh, let's go against the government, let's rebel against the government, man. But actually, I was rebelling against stupidity. So I was sort of laughing at a lot of people who were reading my books, and they were like, oh, this is Troy Chin, I don't like him anymore. So after that, I kind of realized, you know what, I'm not going to be able to predict what audiences want, but I know what I want to do. I know what the message is going to be. So in that sense, I became a lot braver in terms of what I want to put out. I don't really think so much in terms of the commercial viability of the work. I care more about whether this makes sense in the overall arc of the narrative that I'm trying to tell, you know. Creativity is often thrown around as a blanket term, as this mythical thing that once you have it, you can do like wonderful things. You can solve problems. You can actually make government jobs interesting, right? They push this all the time. But I think it's kind of meaningless if you just approach it as this very large term that is this intangible quality that you have, that about creation and making things. And it tends to be like, it's very artistic and stuff like that. But I think creativity comes down to a mindset, a way in which you approach the world, right? The way in which you see things. Totally different thing. You need to get people into the mindset where there is not just this one way to do things, right? See, this very notion that there's only one path to success, which is to make money, already is in opposition to the whole concept of creativity. Because if you have creativity, you will laugh at that statement, because it's like, what do you mean there's only one path to success? There's like infinite ways to success, But the thing is, if you went out with a camera right now, you and I, we ran out and interviewed people on the street and asked them, what do you think is the surefire way to make your millions as well? Get a good degree, get a good job, blah blah blah. You've heard this spiel. These things get said all the time. 9 out of 10 people will all see that one path to success, which means we don't have the mindset ready for creativity. If you see that one guy who says that, well, I'll figure it out. Maybe I'll do a couple of things. Maybe I might want to start a business. Maybe I want to actually, I used to be really good at like mountain climbing. Maybe I'll start like a mountain climbing business or something. Hey, that guy right there, that's creativity, because he's seeing things more than that one way. And I think we need people to get into that mindset, right? And I don't think the government can be the one to push people towards this mindset. I think it happens at home with the family, with the parents, because really at the end of the day, no matter what you do, you get rid of PSLE, you get rid of O levels, A levels, whatever, it's not going to change the fact that parents are still the ones who are going to make your kids study all the time, go for tuition so they can get a good degree, get a good job. It's the parents. The parents have to be the ones who say, you know what, we gotta let our kids try new things and fail. That's very important. People need to get ready to fail. I think that's really, really key. We have it too good. We are very comfortable as a nation. We have never truly experienced true and utter failure before. Let's talk about the 2008 financial crisis. Okay, the whole world suffered. But we, for the most part, we scraped by fairly easily, okay? Because I know people are still buying iPhones, they were still queuing up for cars, they were still trying to buy their BTO flats, and whatever, okay? So for the most part, we were doing okay. We didn't get to experience true suffering. And maybe it's time for the government to let us suffer. I think suffering is good. Suffering builds character, It makes you tough. I actually do believe Lee Kuan Yew will agree with me on this, that suffering is a very important part of building not just a nation, but yourself. Parents need to let their kids suffer. They need to let their kids fail, I know our parents' generation, they did suffer. So they don't want their kids to suffer. So it's like they want to provide the best things for them. But sometimes you gotta let them fall down and bleed out. It's like, yeah, no, I'm not. You pick yourself up. And stop being overprotective. Over your kids. Like they're playing with a stick. Let them play with a stick. Let them hurt themselves. This is important because you got a stick out there. You hit this thing, you bleed. Oh, guess what? Don't do that again. You learn creativity. You need to fail. You need to get hurt. The more you get hurt, the more you get failed, the tougher you get, and the more you're open to a lot of ideas. That is part and parcel of creativity. You can't have one without the other. I just felt that there were so many more things that we could have done that would have been more productive in terms of the use of those 2.5 years. Because let's face it, right? Yeah, we do this thing called Chongswa. You know, we go out into the field, we do our drills, you know, you do marches and all that boring stuff. But for the most part, and I can guarantee you, you ask any national serviceman out there, right? They will not be able to tell you with a straight face that they spent every waking hour of those 2.5 years productively doing things. For the most part, they're wasting their time. They're not doing anything, okay? A lot of times when I'm in the middle of national service, right smack in the middle, I can picture the bunk. I'm sitting there in the middle of the day, 3 p.m. after lunch, the fans are going on, the radio has like Jusan San or some Chinese channel, and everybody's sprawled on the floor, half naked, sleeping. That is the scene of the army for me, okay? It's not about some guys with guns going around playing Call of Duty or whatever shit, right? It's people sleeping in a bunk. And to me, that is an utter waste of time, man. You know, we could have done so many other things. I actually would have felt better if we actually have active deployments. Like we actually were deployed, maybe not in actual wars. I don't want to get killed, man. You know, but maybe as humanitarian relief efforts. So we are always actively, you know, doing it. Whatever disasters happen, we are always actively deployed. We help out more than just the immediate neighbors. We actually get sent, you know, to whatever, you know, and actually do stuff for people. I think I would have felt so much more fulfilled in terms of those years of service. And that's my biggest complaint, because we wasted so much time. And let's be honest, between the ages of 18 and 21, that's a period of everybody's life where you are full of energy. You actually have this thing called creativity. You know, you actually have creativity going into NS, but because you wasted those, I'm not saying that NS destroys creativity, but I'm saying that because we wasted so much time during this 2.5 years, our brains were rotting. So we didn't have a lot of stimulation, you know, and that to me is a sin, because we are killing off so much possibilities that could have happened to teenagers, man, guys who have all these ideas. You know, one of the biggest complaints that in the comics world in particular, that there's this guy called Jerry Hines. He runs a comic making school in Singapore, and I totally agree with him. You know, one day I had a chat with him at the Singapore Writers Fest, and he told me that, you know what the biggest complaint that I have for national service is that I notice that all these kids who want to draw, after NS, they don't want to draw anymore. And I totally agree with him, because most people after that, they come out to do university, they have to start dealing with university life. You know, imagine if you don't have NS, right, and you just do university immediately. Most people will be crafting their first books during that 4 years in university, because they're probably skipping class and drawing and whatever. And that's where all the really wonderful stuff happens, you know. But because you have this 2 years, 2.5 years, that's a really long time. And for me, that is really a sin.